Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. It's been so long. I know we have been away for quite some time. Life has been lifing. Mars has been Marsing. And here we are at long last. So thank you for being patient. Welcome back to, I guess, our Royal Astrology series. And today we're going to be looking over the coronation chart of King Charles III and looking at how things may or may not go for the future King of England or the current King of England, the UK. I keep saying England. Maybe that's a sign.
Are you prophesizing?
I don't know.
Prophesizing.
Sorry. The current King of the United Kingdom. So with me, I have my lovely co-host, the lovely Kelli Glazebrook. Say hello. And the lovely Mo Olufemi.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. So we're having some technical difficulties. So Mo is here, but
she's here. She's not a
ghost. Keep the camera off.
I swear.
We haven't. We're not remotely puppeting her from a secret location. She does exist.
Yes. So how should we begin? What's happening? So what do we know so far? We know that King Charles III has currently picked the coronation date of May 6th, right? Mm-hmm. But before we get to all that, we're going to do a little bit of some review, right? Look over some aspects for those of you who still need a little bit of catch up with what we're talking about. We're going to try our best to slow down and take things bit by bit so that you don't get lost. We're going to review some stuff around electional astrology, which is talking about when we choose a specific date and time for the best outcome possible for the event in mind, right? Whether it's a wedding or buying a car or whatever it might be. There are things that we can do to make the best of it. And then we're also going to talk about the date of the coronation at present, which is May 6, 2023, and whether or not we think that date is a good fit, and whether or not we think that date is going to give Charles what he wants, and what it might mean for the monarchy going forward.
Or whether that date will actually happen.
Or whether or not it will actually happen. Because in the news recently, it doesn't seem as though King Charles has been receiving a very warm welcome. Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of protests, not my king. There have been eggs thrown. We know that the UK right now is going through a lot of financial hardship, where Brexit has delivered what it has promised, and that seems to be a lot of strife, poverty, and lack. And when you have a new king who wants a shiny coronation, when the nation is hungry and cold, it's not really going over well. Yeah, especially when your king has multiple houses, multiple properties, and millions upon millions of pounds, and you can't keep your heat on. So it's kind of a vibe that's not really good thus far. And we're not sure if it's going to improve. And looking at this chart going forward, it's not looking too great, but we're going to get into that.
And Europe might be feeling a little not in favor of kings right now, just given what's going on in France as well. Yes. Mo, you said it was what, the Saturn return?
It is the Saturn return, right? And soon to be Pluto return of the French Revolution. So,
and the streets of Paris are on fire tonight. So, you know.
Yeah, make of that what you will.
In addition to which, we also have a war that's going on in Europe between Ukraine and Russia, and that might spread, right? So there's a lot of things that are coming up that are talking about like class disparity and wealth disparity and how these things are absolutely playing into this tension currently that's going on, because it's just like, why should we suffer while you live in comfort and luxury, right? So these are some of the things that are coming up so far.
Yeah, and we had heard that sometimes we go a little too fast when we're talking about like aspects or different things. So we just wanted to cover it real quick before we jump in, like what we mean by like different things, so that hopefully we're not confusing people. But yeah.
But please leave questions and comments below so that we can do that even more for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely King Charles thinks that he's going to be more active, I think, than he was before as Prince of Wales. And I think he signaled that even before he became king, that he had the intention of doing that. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he wants to take on like a bigger role, I think, in a lot of ways than maybe his mother did before, or other like sovereigns, and how that's going to jive with the mood of the people.
Mhm.
Right.
Recently, Charles got into some hot water for meeting with the EU president, was it? I believe.
Yeah.
Or premier, I'm not sure what title it is exactly, but apparently that's a no-go because that's going a little bit too far into politics when you are sovereign of the country. And I'm guessing there's supposed to be some separation between the two, which is odd to me because aren't there a lot of Tory support within the palaces? Like a lot of back and forth between people working in the palace and working in politics. And I could be wrong, but isn't there supposed to be an even amount of the two parties working within the palaces? Like,
You would
so there's
think?
no, wasn't that a thing in like all like the royal historical
You
novels
know,
and
I'm not
films?
sure if
Like,
that was the rule, but I know for sure it was more that, especially when it comes to politically charged issues, because I know the reason that um, Ursula von der Leyen was in London was to meet with Prime Minister Sunak to talk about, you know, a deal for Ireland to still participate in some of the EU markets, you know, given everything with Brexit. And that was a very politically charged issue. And I think the issue with Charles meeting her was such that it seemed to be sending a message that the palace was supporting, you know, supporting the deal, even though it was controversial. And I think him making even a subtle political statement like that seems to be like an overreach for the monarchy.
well,
Yeah.
Charles has said there's only room for one sovereign at the time, not two. Clearly, I won't be able to do the same things I've done, you know, as heir. So, of course, you operate within the constitutional parameters. Sounds very certain about that.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh, so what do you mean?
What do you mean? So that was from 2018. I'm assuming since then, Charles has stuck to this way of thinking, and it may or may not be working out for him.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. So, like we said, the coronation is scheduled for May 6, 2023. The main focus so far is on the royal family for the foreseeable future because of it. Large celebrations and concerts are planned, although it doesn't seem like any noted celebrity wants to perform at the coronation, which has been
I'm
another
like, who's
big
gonna be
issue.
left?
Like he's inviting all these artists and they're like, sorry, can't do it, which in the past would have seemed a little bit weird because when Queen Elizabeth was still alive, it felt like people still wanted to be associated with the royal brand to an extent. Okay, that's not really the case right now. There will be a new gold carriage and new thrones for Charles and Camilla.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. Ooh, okay. And it's still unknown whether or not Harry and Meghan and the kids will attend, but they're making a very big deal over it. But May 6th happens to be, I believe, the 4th birthday of Archie.
Yes.
So this is where a lot of people are feeling like there's some pettiness in picking this date. And as astrologers, we're wondering the same because there's not too many great things about this chart. So it might be a situation
364 other days like,
of the year that you could choose. You choose this one and it's not even a great one. So we'll see if potential pettiness might be the downfall of the monarchy in the end. So let's go forward.
I do think it's interesting too, the coronation like stamp or whatever it is like definitely highlighting his like environmental stuff that he's been into. And I think in the chart and I think in like his own natal chart too, I think we'll see some of that as well. But that's just something to keep in mind.
Yes.
And it's very aesthetically pleasing, which is on the par for Mr. Charles. He likes the arts. So let's review some concepts, this being the aspects. So remember, aspects are basically conversations happening between planets and angles and other parts of the chart. So just two or more bodies talking in a way. So the energy of the conversation depends on the aspect. So a conjunction is when two or more planets are together. And the orb can be 0 degrees to as far out as 10, maybe, depending on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Basically, they're working together. I always think about the Sailor Moon and the Sailor Moon kids like putting their hands together over the wand together and be like, we're working together. That's like a conjunction.
So I've been getting into Vedic astrology a lot more. And I think of the conjunction more in terms of possession, right? The planets are trying to be each other and they're trying to merge, but what do the Vedics call it? They call it planetary war. It's like the planets are really right on top of each other, trying to achieve the same thing, but like because they're not the same, they're different people, right? They're struggling to come together. So like it's like having someone hijack your body because they want to control how you do something. It could be good or bad depending on, I mean, I wouldn't go far as, Vedic astrologers would go and saying that planetary war is not great. I would actually say that it depends on the planets involved. It really depends on the planets involved.
Is it when you're trying to put your two little guys together, go kiss, kiss?
Yes.
Yes. Or become one, like merge together.
Yes.
Or even if you can think of like someone putting their hand into a puppet. So depending on the hand might be nice, like Venus, like full of roses and perfume, might be a nice ride. Or it could be like Pluto with like razor blades. I'm making things up, but it's it's like the fit, the comfort depends on the planet making that hand go into the puppet.
Exactly.
Right? All right, opposition are when two or more planets are opposite each other. So think of two people sitting on opposite sides of the table, right? So we're having a conversation, but we might be coming at the information from two different angles. So this is more of a trying to find compromise and maybe not always being successful, or maybe swinging back and forth between two positions.
Yeah.
Yes, the seesaw is great. The opposition is of the nature of Saturn, and Saturn is really binding. And when you have two people who are seemingly diametrically opposed and trying to create equilibrium of some kind to get their word in, you find yourself in a gridlock, which Saturn tends to do. And so the opposition is very much like that.
Okay. Could also be fighting energy sometimes.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes
Mars is there.
Especially when Mars is there. So, you need to see your opponent in the eye before you're like, pop.
And you're like, bam.
Yeah.
Or you need to see your lover across the table, right? And you're throwing yourself at them, right? So a lot of different ways that these things can play out. Sextile is an easier aspect. So this is about 60 degrees apart. It's a flowing aspect. It takes a little bit of effort, right? So there's commonality. The planets involved can see each other, understand each other to an extent, and with a little bit of action, things can come together, but it will take some effort. It doesn't just happen because it's there, in a way, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a planning aspect in a way, sort of.
I love what you were saying there because Bernadette Brady's predictive astrology book, I really love how she laid out the sextile. And I know a lot of people disrespect the sextile because they're like, it vibes like Venus, it kind of tries to throw you a bone. But I think the key with the sextile is that someone lubricates something so that it can happen, but you have to seize the opportunity and do something with it. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I have a ton of sextiles in my natal chart, and it's just
Me
like you kind of have to grease the wheels.
You gotta get up
and like get it up to speed.
Like you actually have to put a little bit of elbow grease in. Not a lot, but you have to make
No,
that
not a
effort.
lot. It's just
You
like
do
someone gives
something.
you a gift, but it's like, okay, now I have to use it.
Yeah, like if someone gives you a gift and it requires some assembly, I think the sextile would be the assembly. It's not difficult, but it does take you actually doing something.
Yeah.
Somebody gives you an IKEA coffee table, you still have to put it together.
Yeah. That's a good one. So it might be a little bit of stress, but nothing crazy, right? It's fine. Yeah. Okay, so then we have the square, a little bit more tension. This is when two or more planets are 90 degrees apart. This is talking about clashing elements or conflict, but it could also be creative energy. Sometimes I describe this as like rubbing two sticks together, right? We don't like the sensation, but we love the heat. We love the fire that comes out of it, right? So not all tension is negative. It gets you going. It pushes you into action.
I kind of think of sometimes like a blacksmith hammer, hitting 90 degrees on an anvil. And it's like, it's not fun and it's a lot of work. It takes so much effort. Have you seen a blacksmith's arms? Like,
right? Stuff.
But they make crazy cool stuff, you know,
Oh
that
my
comes
God,
out of it.
Kelly, I love that you brought up the blacksmithing because it makes me think of the fact that the square has that Mars like energy into it, and one of the significations of Mars is the
The
forge,
Smith,
right?
yeah.
You have to
Mhm.
put things under pressure to create stuff, and squares and oppositions kind of force things to happen, more so the square than the opposition. Like hard aspects force things to happen, whereas the soft
Mhm.
aspects,
Allow it to.
they allow it
It
to,
might
but
happen and you might let it pass you by. So not all
yeah.
positive aspects are good because there can be an aspect of laziness involved, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's so funny that you said that with the blacksmith because I actually tweeted that. I have a ton of squares in my chart.
Oh, okay.
And there was something that came on Twitter with the blacksmith, and he was using his hot, like he was banging this sword, and then he used the heat from the sword to start a fire with a piece of paper.
I
And I was like,
saw
that's me
that.
and my
Yes.
squares.
Yes, I saw
I
that.
didn't see that, but I love that idea. But
Yeah.
I always think about the square because and the anvil, because it's, you hit something at a 90-degree angle on there,
Yeah.
and you're just hammering away, like, and for a while it doesn't look like anything, and then all of a sudden it will start to come together. And I think that's how it feels when you're in a square a lot of the times, is you're like,
That's what it
I'm
feels like.
working, nothing's happening.
That's exactly what it feels like. You're spinning your wheels forever, and then all of a sudden you're
Sudden it hits and you're like, oh, I know what you're
yeah.
making.
Like all that stress was worth it. That's what it feels like. All right, so that's a square. And then we have the trine, which is two more planets 120 degrees apart, same element, so air to air, earth, water, and fire, all within the element together. Okay, this is talking about harmony. This is smooth, easy energy, but smooth. Someone that I was reading this, it's like sometimes it's like a smooth, easy energy off a cliff, right? Like there's
Yes.
no impediments. There's no rocks, there's no bricks, nothing to stop that flow. Sometimes you need a square or an opposition to stop an accident, right? With a trine, it can just be an easy whoop, and there you went.
I think
So
of
that
like
can be for good or for
people
bad.
like out of control, like going down a ski cliff sometimes,
Mhm.
and it's just
It's
like there's nothing stopping you.
right,
You're
but there's
on
lots of
snow.
harmony,
Yeah, you're
right?
going down, nothing's going.
So to Kelly's
Yeah.
example, what that is saying is like you have the perfect skis, like the snow is great, the ice is great, like everything's working in harmony to make this event happen. Now, whether the event is positive or negative, that's the next question, right? It's like, did you crash into a wall or like, like whatever it was. So trines and sextiles, they're wonderful to see, but it doesn't always mean positive.
Yeah. I
It
love
really
the trine
depends.
because like people, for those of you who've been on Astro Twitter, a lot of people have been doing the Jupiter slander lately. They're like,
What?
why doesn't Jupiter make things great? It's like Jupiter gives you what you think you want. And then you realize that everything's accelerating off a cliff because, you just wanted stuff.
Mhm. Jupiter will give you gas. He will give you grease. He's like, more.
Yeah,
No.
more like, let's do more of this.
More.
As an exalted Jupiter and Cancer in the first, let me tell you, more isn't always better.
It's not.
A lesson I've had to learn way too many times.
Yeah. So I think we mentioned briefly with the trine and the sextile to a lesser extent. Sometimes these smooth or easy aspects, as we call them, can breed laziness, and it can also breed a little bit of wastefulness, where if things come too
Yes.
easily to you, you don't know the concept of effort. You don't know, like it's almost as if you're a naturally gifted singer and you've never had to rehearse, right? That can be a good or a bad thing, depending on the situation, right? That can make you really lazy, where someone with a square or an opposition comes along, or the conjunction, and because they've had to work for their talents, they blow you out the water, right?
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
Am I the
right?
only one that thinks of a trine as a white man and a sextile as a white lady?
Right? Okay. For another podcast. That's for another show. We're gonna have to pick that one apart. But yes, so just keep these things in mind as we're talking about these charts, because these things come in layers. It's not always a straight, simple way of interpreting these things. They're all playing at once to different levels of strength. So it's kind of like you have to wait and see how the aspects act out and how we as people act on this energy. Because remember, Charles and everyone involved has free will, right?
Yes.
They get to pick and choose which aspects and which planets they want to play with and elevate and which ones they don't.
And yeah, and also multiple things are happening, like you're saying, at the same time. No one has all, well, I shouldn't say no one, hardly anyone would have all trines or all oppositions or all squares. So you may be struggling in one area and something else in your life comes easier. And now you have to weigh all those things when you're looking at a chart. And that's why astrology is difficult, but also fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we have to practice some grace, right? Because we know that Charles, at the end of the day, is a human being in a really weird position, in a really weird life. And I wouldn't want to be him right now, to be honest.
No, I wouldn't want.
It's a lot.
No, I think the only person we have to hear to be worried about is Mo, who's in the Commonwealth, right? But technically, us discussing the length of or the coronation of the king and not saying nice things is like treason.
I mean, does that doesn't really affect me? Like, I don't know. We're so
be safe, Mo.
I know, right?
We're so far removed. It's there.
Safe.
We don't want to hear like Mo was carted away by the king's men or something like that and tossed into a tower. Thank God, right?
Janelle and I are living in the land of we already did that once.
Yeah, no.
We already were like, no, thank you. We don't need no king.
So the next thing we're going to be doing, we're going to be reviewing some key points about elections, what their purpose are and how we use them in technical fashion in astrology. And also we're going to be going through some points in electional charts, right? So we use elections to get the best possible outcome for an endeavor, whatever it might be, whether it's a marriage or buying a car or buying a house or traveling. We try to use astrology to pick the best dates and times for you to do such a thing, right? Historically, this has been used by kings and queens and across cultures, so this is nothing new. The technique is used to minimize the malefic or quote unquote negative planets and strengthen the benefics or quote unquote positive planets, right? Then we have the moon, who is the lady of the hour. The importance of the moon cannot be overstated or stressed enough. She is everything in a chart, especially because she moves so quickly, right? So when we're working with a client and we're trying to elect a chart, we're absolutely looking for the most auspicious chart available for the event itself, okay?
And I think the important thing to remember is there's never a perfect chart.
Never, ever a perfect chart.
Like you will kill yourself when you first start trying to do this. You will spend hours like going over and being like, I just need to scooch this planet, or I just need to move this one over there. You can't.
Only, right? And that's okay. Sometimes the chart that you get is the chart that you need, the chart that's appropriate for you in that particular occasion for whatever reason, right? So as much as there is free will, there is some level of fate involved where we're trying to help you mature as a soul to an extent, hopefully.
And just because you didn't elect something doesn't mean it's going to fail either, because that's another thing people start freaking out about when they learn about elections. I didn't elect my wedding chart. I didn't even know about anything about astrology when I got married. I'm fine. I didn't die.
I would imagine that when you look at your wedding chart, you see enough, aspects or things like that that show, oh yeah, this is a wedding chart for us, because it makes sense.
Oh yeah, our wedding chart's a hot mess, like us.
Fair enough. So sometimes the chart picks you, right?
Yes. And that's okay.
And that's okay. And that's actually a lot of fun sometimes when you look at a chart, you're like, oh snap. Of course this happened this day because I can see now in the chart what was going on, right? So don't worry about it.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
And then this is just the bibliography. We'll come back.
We'll come back to that. But before, I think we're going to use some of Leah Whitehorse's information because she has a wonderful page that I use a lot. And this one is talking about choosing a wedding date, but this is giving us general electional astrology techniques and, hints and pieces that we want to use for the day. She uses it for wedding, but I think the coronation is kind of like Charles marrying the country or the kingdom, right? Yeah. And me and Kelly were teasing earlier, like way back in the the way early King Arthur days, weren't there rituals around? If you became king, you would make a ritual kind of like situation where you would say, if things go bad with the land, I will sacrifice my life and my blood to give back to the land.
Mhm.
Right. So there is this kind of historical, intimate, even mythological situation with the king and the land or the nation being one.
Mhm.
There's union here. So this is a wedding between Charles and the United Kingdom
Yes.
and what's left of the Commonwealth.
Yeah,
So
no, that's not our problem. That's their problem.
so we're gonna go
We
through
got enough
some
problems.
we have a ton of problems. I mean, this is not entertaining, but it's interesting to watch. But you know, it's a lot going on around the world. So let's get into some charts, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop my share and then turn it over to you.
So
Oh,
let's
so you can see
go.
my.
All right. Can you guys see my chart okay? Or my screen okay?
Yes, we can see your
Mhm.
screen.
Perfect. So we are looking at the chart of Charles, born November 14th, 1948 at 9:14 p.m. in Buckingham Palace.
Mhm.
So
And
what we,
of course, we had done a whole breakdown of this chart before.
yes.
So if you
please
want
check
like
out.
the in-depth nitty-gritty, what makes Charles tick, you can go back and look at that.
For sure. So what do we want to talk about in terms of Charles right now?
I guess we can just talk about, like, because this is a chart that's speaking to changes in his status. Like,
Mhm,
I think looking at his 10th house and also his midheaven
mhm.
will probably give us some clues.
All right, so let's do that. So Charles is a Taurus on whole sign, because we're using whole signs, guys. So he has
Particularly.
Taurus on the whole sign 10th house cusp, and he also has the midheaven in Aries. All right.
Mhm.
So those are two of his most public houses, you would say.
Yes.
Mhm.
One
And he's
comment I want to
having
make about
the nodal return.
he is having his nodal return. That's a good point. But one comment I wanted to make about the 10th house versus the midheaven, when you have the floating midheaven with whole sign or equal houses, is that personal sense of achievement becomes very different from that outer observation of what you do. So, I mean, for him having a Venus ruled 10th whole sign house versus having that Mars ruled midheaven, I think that, what people expect of his role is like that sort of procedural, traditional, like more so aesthetic because it's Venus ruled role. Whereas I feel like Mars being in that middle decan of Aries, I'm sorry, the midheaven being in that middle decan of Aries, he's really going to want to push forward a bunch of different things. I think he's going to want to play a more active role for
Mhm,
sure.
mhm, mhm. So what do you think, Mo, of that midheaven being ruled by Mars and Sag in the fifth with Jupiter? Now, before you start, I just want to make sure that people who are listening, who are talking about or questioning us about rulership, this is what we're talking about. When a sign is shown, it has a planet that's governing it or ruling over it or is the lord of it, right? And whatever that lord is up to is going to influence the house that is under its command. Okay.
Yeah.
So the sign of Aries, which is Charles's midheaven, is ruled by the sign or the
Mars.
planet Mars, right? Because Aries is ruled by Mars. So this is the ruler of Charles's ninth house.
Right.
Okay. Now he has two ruled Mars's houses, right? Because there's also a Scorpio house. So the Scorpio house, Scorpio is also ruled by Mars. Okay.
The
So
fourth
these
house,
two
yeah.
houses have Mars in charge. Right. We just do that all over the houses.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, I think it's interesting that it's in the fifth house
Mhm.
because, the fifth house has to do with, the arts as well as matters relating to children. And, it's funny, an uncommon or two uncommon significations of the fifth house are emissaries or agents who act on your behalf, as well as speculation, gambling, or like things that could vaguely be related to the stock market, right?
Mhm.
but also
I
bribes that go along with emissaries.
Oh
yes,
boy.
exactly, the gift giving. And
And this is
so
in the sign of international bribes, and we have heard about some of Charles's
Isn't
international
that
bribes
interesting? So you
and
take the ninth
suitcases of
house.
cash.
Yeah. You take the
Mhm.
ninth house international significations and you merge that, with the fifth ones, and then you get
yeah,
international bribery.
yeah. I mean,
Gets
especially
doubled by
because
that.
Sag does have those kinds of associations, and Jupiter
Mhm.
is also one of those like planets that does have connotations of wealth, right?
Mhm.
And I think there are going to be a lot of questions about how Charles may use his wealth and influence to, I'm trying to find the most diplomatic way to put this.
Lobby?
she's in Canada.
Kind
Just
of like,
wait for it,
yeah,
folks.
lobbying a little bit.
Lobbying, right? Influencing law, influencing ideas that are going to become law, right? Because the
Yes.
ninth house has some of that law, creation of law connotation, right?
Yes. You know what else? Like, I mean, we were all talking about this before we did this recording, but um, yes, I did listen to Spare. Don't
Mhm.
judge me for it. But it was an interesting thing to learn because, as someone who's not overly emotionally invested in the royal family like that, I was just like, okay, this is Harry's perspective on his experience of his father. And
Mhm.
I don't know where people were getting all of the spiteful interpretations. I was just like, this just made Charles seem like a real person, right? And the thing that I got the most was that he is someone who is really interested in the arts.
Mhm.
And the fifth house does have to do with the arts. And so I do feel like a lot of his reign may involve, inspiring certain things around art and culture. Like I think, him having that midheaven in the ninth as well, being very interested in culture. Ninth house is also, those like literary works that are like really like I think that that's something that will become relevant during Charles's reign, like for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah.
It's interesting about Charles's chart. If he wasn't heir to the throne, this would be a chart of someone who'd probably do really well in the arts
Yeah.
and probably has skill of some sort, whether
Or a
you.
patron,
Mhm.
even just like, even
Yes,
if he
a
wasn't the
patron.
king. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So,
What
yeah,
do
and
y'all think of nodal returns? What do you tell people?
I typically say, okay, one second. So when we're talking about nodal returns, guys, we're talking about the nodes coming back to the place that they were at the time of Charles's birth. Okay, so those two guys. I always talk about it as like this is like you coming back to like your karmic path and deciding, seeing how far you've come, how you've
Yes,
mastered these themes in your life.
Yeah.
I agree.
Charles,
It's pretty
yeah.
interesting that it's happening right as he's like ascending the throne.
Yeah,
Mhm.
whereas he makes that covenant
Mhm.
officially.
It's interesting that this is also happening in the aftermath of Harry's book Spare, because he kind of laid bare the issues that are happening within the family, which is where Charles's South Node is. Traditionally, we talk about the South Node in terms of like a weakening or draining energy in a house or next to planets, where they kind of just say, maybe you've spent too much time here in previous lifetimes. Let's focus a little bit more up top to find some balance. Not either or, but a balancing act. So home and family might be difficult for Charles. It may not be easy, which we kind of know, right? He has been very vocal about the fact that he did not like his upbringing or his family life to an extent.
Right.
And then the North Node is talking about energy that is being pulled into a house, amplifying, but it's also foreign to the person. It's not familiar. In this case, this is about having a public image, a career, really vying for his own status in the world, at least in this chart.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really interesting because another thing I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself here because it's interesting that he has this nodal return happening as he's ascending the throne because, as a lot of us know and will make sense later, the nodes will also shift such that, they're hitting his midheaven, but what's interesting is that Venus is his 10th whole sign house ruler, right? And Venus is in the third. And so I think of that, sort of PR sort of role that the royals typically play, right? There's that aesthetic sort of role. And you know what? You see that Venus Neptune conjunction on his IC ruling his 10th. And in this part of Libra that does have connotations of contract and sacrifice, I feel like a lot of that is just sort of this undoing of the social contract that, or the hidden contract that he and the media have to maintain his image. And I think that that's another thing we're going to see a lot of during his reign as well. Just how understanding how deep that sort of relationship runs. And I do feel like some of that purging of things going on with his family. And I mean, from the sounds of it, it seems like maybe in his ascension to the throne, maybe kind of, I don't want to say burning bridges per se with people in the family, but creating these sorts of rifts within his own family as he takes on this role that becomes more prominent. And I think that, as we move, as the nodes shift, we're going to see a lot more of that as well.
Especially since it's the third house of siblings. I think, yeah, you're going to see a
Yes.
lot more rifts between him and his brothers and sisters for sure.
And then the third house also has connotations to just blood relatives too. So
Yeah,
the siblings for
extended
sure, but
family.
also the extended family. Like everyone is kind of probably going to be every man and woman for themselves trying to get something.
Oh, you know what else? Like, so I think about like how he's trying to also restructure the monarchy as well, because the degree of his IC is floating as well.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really speaking to that culling of the royal family, like the slimmed monarchy. I do think that that transition of the nodes out of his nodal return, and having the south node eventually cross over that Venus and that IC, kind of like speaking to, the rifts that end up eventually being created because he starts, cutting off the entitlements of, other people in the family. Yeah.
I don't always use the Via Combusta, but like looking at the Venus there and
Oh yeah.
and Mercury, I'm like, he probably also feels like he is the scapegoat for a lot of that. Like he doesn't understand maybe why people get mad at him, but they do because he's the one that's doing it.
Yeah.
Keep this work. So for people at home, the Via Combusta is from what, 15 Libra to 15 Scorpio?
Scorpio, yeah.
And
It's called the burning way.
yeah.
Yes.
So when planets are in that little track of sky, they tend to be a little bit intense, no?
Especially the moon. Especially the moon.
Guess where my moon is?
Yay! I have my Mars in there, but yeah. So these planets are a little bit stressed. So his Mercury, his South Node, his Venus, those guys are pretty much in the Via Combusta way, right? I also wanted to mention briefly about the family stuff. The fact that that fourth house we were talking about with some of the karmic stuff that he's working out, I'm just thinking about the charts of his sons, where I think William throws his Jupiter into this house for him versus Harry puts his
and William's, I think both their midheavens are actually in the fourth.
in Scorpio.
Yeah.
Okay, so both of his sons have their midheavens in his fourth house. William put his Jupiter back there, which is his chart ruler, versus Harry puts his Saturn, I think his Pluto back there. So what did Harry do? He said, listen, here's what's really going on in this family. It sucks, right?
He aired it out.
He aired it out. He did the Pluto. He was like, look underneath, look at all the garbage that we've been living with, right? And how difficult, especially for me as the Saturn ruled son, to deal with this within the family. Right. So I think that is definitely playing a part in this, where the children have kind of come forth and said, this South Node dynamic we felt it as children.
Yeah. You know what else I just realized? So there's this technique you can use called annual perfections, and the idea is that, primarily the ascendant, but theoretically every planet point in the chart each year, so from solar return to solar return, those placements move into a different sign. And if you use whole sign houses, house, and that can describe some of the themes that you can expect based on the sign that gets activated, the house that gets activated, the planet that's ruling that place. And so from the ascendant, he's in a Venus ruled year. So he's in the third house,
yes.
Libra year. So that Venus is activated, the IC is activated. And this will be true until he turns 75 in November.
November.
What's interesting is that Venus is also ruling his 10th house. So I think it's comical that he's literally making that covenant to ascend to the throne. But I think this is where, we start to see those shifts in his familial relationships, as well as his restructuring of the ability to pass on, his titles and everything to other people in the family, sort of distributing like the status amongst people in the family, and that being loud. But it's interesting that he's going to switch into the Scorpio year after that. Activating, his sun, his Mercury, as well as the South Node that are all living there. So I think that even though like we can see the ascension being sort of like this highlight of his life, I can see sort of the consequences and unraveling, especially as we get later into this first year of his reign, later this year.
Yeah, like he's sowing the seeds right now.
Yeah,
we'll get to see what it grows into when he moves into his fourth house perfection year.
Which is going to be interesting, because at the same time that he does that, the nodes will have shifted from that house, like you said, into the following house, which is going to be a continuation of all these issues regarding his family, the titles, the blood relatives. Like this is going to be at least a 2 to 3 year issue for him.
Exactly.
Minimum. So when he ascends the throne, these issues do not go away. If anything, they might intensify.
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to move on to the next chart?
Yes.
What are we doing? Who we got?
We're doing
I
Charles.
think we're comparing him to the UK's chart.
Let's see. Okay, so we have the chart of Charles on the inner wheel, and on the outer wheel is the chart of the United Kingdom. We are using the January 1st, 1801 chart at midnight in London, England. I know there's probably 1,000,001 charts for the UK, but this is the one that we're using. So what do we see right away between this? The first thing I noticed was this Jupiter in Leo to Charles's ascendant. Like he's the king to be. Give him a crown.
The king of planets meets the king.
Yes. Jupiter and Zeus is saying, I know you.
I recognize that.
We also see the North Node of the UK directly on Charles's midheaven here. So it's like, it is your destiny to be in the public eye in this country, and we will put you there, I guess. What else we got going on? The Venus of the UK is actually in Charles's 7th house, which is pretty interesting. So like Mo was talking about the relationship with Charles in the arts, I would probably say, I was telling you ladies, I think the UK's greatest export is their arts, right? Their literature, their all sorts of stuff that we've learned overseas from them is probably their best thing that they've put out. And Charles has a deep relationship with that. So we're
also, wondering. Like mythologically, like he's literally marrying the UK in the 7th house.
This is his new boo.
It's trending his Venus.
Right?
So it's 120, roughly degrees from his natal Venus.
So there is harmony between these two. It's easy. They ski easy together. Hopefully not down a cliff. All right. Okay. What else we got going on in this chart?
Oh, the Saturn of the UK is not only in his first house, but it's squaring his sun, which does rule his chart.
Yes. So this is not an easy. This is the hammer. This is the the blacksmith hammering Charles down. So we know that this position for him has never been easy for him.
No.
Right. He has never worn being a prince well, being an heir well, being a son well, being a husband well, like being a father well. Charles has never really done well, I think, with many of his roles. And maybe it's because he lives in the UK. Maybe if he moves away, it'll be easier.
But yeah, so the Saturn UK like chart is like asks a lot of him. And like he maybe struggles a lot to come up with the wherewithal to like fulfill these roles,
Yeah.
especially
Sometimes,
family, because that's the sun in the fourth.
yeah.
I think the
Sometimes
sun.
Saturn. Go ahead. Go.
Oh, I was gonna say like the Saturn, because Saturn has a hard time in Leo because Saturn in Aquarius is more of that collective focus, right? And Saturn does have connotations of service. Um, I feel like that speaks well to the, I guess, sort of grip that the monarchy has had on British culture for so long, and also the world by extension via colonialism. And it speaks to how it's like, okay, you're in this role where you're elevated and of service, but like it's your birthright. And that being sort of this weird contradictory thing that Saturn represents, where it's like your will because of your status and how you were born is like giving you the authority to dictate what is you know of service and of value to the people, right? And that sometimes like there's this issue with conflating your egoic needs with like the actual needs of the collective. And I think that every monarch deals with this issue, but I also think that Charles as well will deal with this issue more so because that Saturn is also falling in his first house.
It's uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. And sometimes when I see clients, and I'm sure when you guys see clients with Sun Saturn or Saturn to a luminary or angle or a major planet, there can be a lot of issues around self-worth, self-esteem, worthiness.
Yes.
Feeling like you deserve, feeling like whatever you do, it's not enough. And I can see that in Charles's life, especially I think with Saturn being square to this sun, and he's a Scorpio sun. So there's an element of Scorpios that I've seen that there's always this kind of like transformation process where they go through these phases of great change and upheaval. But I feel like this Saturn restricts him or restricted him in how much he could evolve and change and display that as something as a positive, especially like what you were saying, Mo, in maintaining this really rigid structure, of the monarchy and the hierarchy and the power. This was really kind of claustrophobic for Charles, most likely, where it's just like, I can't be who I am because I have all this saying that I cannot change. If not, this whole thing goes to pieces.
Yeah.
How is he supposed to change? Like, how is he supposed to evolve?
No.
How is he supposed to be someone different?
Now, the thing about fixed planets like this and fixed signs is like when they smash together, they don't bend, they break.
Yes.
Right.
They sure
So we can definitely see a breaking down of Charles and the things, with the fourth house, right? His family has been broken down because of this structure.
Yeah.
So, woof. Not exactly easy stuff here,
I am very interested in the UK's moon in his 12th.
True.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like not everyone's on his side.
No. No. I think it's gonna bring out a lot more of the hidden enemy type deals going on.
So
especially because that moon squares his Venus, which rules his 10th. Like
so how will we interpret this? So 12th house has connotations with secret enemies that you can't see. So like people who are behind your back plotting, foreign things, right? Being away, suffering, confinement, right? So not the best house, isolation. So the moon can represent the people in a chart. Especially when we're doing mundane astrology. So the people may not be on Charles's side, and they are in conflict with his Venus, right? That 90-degree angle. And Venus is in control of his public image through the 10th house, right? So there are people who are actively undermining him behind the scenes, who are trying to bring down his reign. Right?
They're not about it.
Right. And these are strong people because the moon is in great position in Cancer.
Yes. Really moon loves Cancer. She
loves Cancer. And she might even have public support because she's in her own house with the midheaven in this chart. So what do we know? The Not My King protest is the first thing that comes to mind.
Mhm.
You know what else
So,
I also think about is the fact that, the moon has connotations of maternal figures. And what's interesting is that unlike a lot of Europe, a lot of the most notable figures in English history especially since Queen Victoria, have
mhm.
been women.
Queen
Mhm.
So you
Elizabeth the
have,
First.
I mean, hell,
Yeah.
even Margaret Thatcher, for
Mhm.
fuck's
Yeah.
sake. Like, so I think that there's this weird affinity for very conservative, like female leader types. I mean, this is an aside, but I just realized that, you know, uh, Kate Middleton, I'm sorry, Princess of Wales, has that full moon in her chart as well. So that's interesting. Princess Diana herself was also a Cancer sun, so I don't
Mhm.
know. There's some affinity for womanly figures and like power roles.
Mhm.
Oh, even Megan, right? Megan puts her Mars in the ascendant there, and they can't stop talking about that lady.
Yeah. I
Camilla,
mean, hell, even
Cancer.
even Camilla.
Camilla,
Look at Camilla has
Camilla.
like a Cancer stellium. So
Yep.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mhm.
Right.
so
And this
it,
could also be the mother. So, like Queen Elizabeth,
yeah,
they can't stop talking about her and how he will never, ever, ever measure up.
Yeah. Like she's the
yes,
standard that he
yes,
doesn't rise to.
He does
that he
not
won't
rise
rise
to.
to, and they will always compare,
Yeah.
always.
Forever. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, okay, Charles.
It's
Good
not a
luck,
fun
my
place
guy.
to be.
Not a fun
It's
place
not.
to be. So this is just showing the relationship between Charles and the UK, right? These are
Yeah,
some of the things that we're finding. Some of it's good, some of it's a little bit tense, right? But he has
yeah,
the free will to make the best of either and any of these aspects, or play it up or play
exactly.
it down. Um, yeah. Now the question is, will he? We
We'll
don't know.
see.
We'll see. Anything else you want to say about this chart? There's tons that we can say, and I'm sure we can go
No.
We could
back
be
to it
here all
another time.
day.
We'll be here all day. But if there's
Yeah.
anything else that we should talk about,
No.
Now let's see
no.
Coronation. Let's see this
Yeah.
busted chart.
All right,
Yeah.
let's see the coronation chart. So we're gonna go through it point by point for the reasons why we're like, why did you pick this day?
I mean, okay, so this is all I'll give them.
Uh-huh.
Like I know we noticed this when we looked at all the wedding charts and stuff, but they
Mhm.
really love a Leo rising
They
Mhm.
with
do
the
love a
sun
Leo
in the 10th in
rising.
Taurus, or the
This
sun exalted and rejoicing in the ninth in Aries. They
Mhm.
love it. It's their
they
Sun
love
favorite
it.
is
thing to
in the
do.
10th. Yeah, give them that.
Yeah.
Jesus. All right. All right. So how do we want to start this? Do we want to start with how do we want to start this? How should we start this? It's so bad. Okay. It's not that bad. It's fine. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to, how do you walk into this? How do we go? Okay, so as I said earlier, we will leave a website link behind where we're actually using this list from Leo Whitehorse Electional Astrology for picking a wedding date. And since this is Charles marrying the UK as their king,
Yes.
this is essentially a wedding chart. Okay.
Mhm.
And here's all the reasons why we would not pick this as a wedding chart.
Okay.
Because the
First up,
moon. The moon.
let's talk about the moon. First up is the moon in Scorpio. She does not like being in Scorpio, right?
She
Nope.
Not
hates it.
ideal.
She's
She hates it.
fallen.
Mhm.
She can't get up.
She's also just coming out of an eclipse the day before.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
day before on
She's
May
weak.
5th,
She's
she has
weak.
an eclipse at 14 degrees Scorpio.
And it's a lunar
Right.
eclipse.
And it's a lunar eclipse. So it's a full moon eclipse. So
Mhm.
on a full moon, on a regular night, it's a big bright occasion, right? Everybody can see everything under a full moon. When it's a full moon eclipse, everybody's going to feel everything and see everything under a full moon eclipse. So if you're trying to
Yeah.
hide something, you don't
Yeah,
do
no.
this
Mm-mm.
because
Mhm.
people are going to see it. All right. What else about this moon?
The moon is void.
She's
She's
void by
void.
traditional standards, meaning in regards to the traditional seven, the sun through Saturn, this moon is not talking to anybody anymore. I
And
think the
won't
last
until she changes. Yeah.
I think the last aspect she
I
made
mean,
was to
was with
Mars.
Mars.
Mhm.
And
I
he's a
mean,
busted Mars.
the thing is, some people would say the mutual reception does help, and I think it does, but if you think about, you have to think about who the mutual reception is helping.
Okay.
It's helping hidden enemies.
Yes.
So pause, ladies. We have new vocabulary, right? So
Okay.
let's real quick.
Okay, so
Mutual
mutual
reception.
reception is when two planets are exchanging signs.
Mhm. Okay.
Some people say there has to be like a traditional like
Aspect.
Ptolemaic aspect. Other people will be generous and say they just have to be exchanging sides. So for example, the moon rules Cancer
Mhm.
and Mars rules Scorpio, and
Mhm.
they're both 120 degrees give or take from each other, and they're
Mhm.
exchanging sides. So that's a mutual reception.
Mhm.
Um,
But
Kelly, I
who
love
does
what you
it
said about
benefit?
hidden enemies, because one thing you can do in mundane charts is the 10th house describes like the leader, the ruler, whereas the 4th house describes the opposition.
Mm.
And so it's interesting that you also say that, because the 12th house rules hidden enemies, and the 4th house, in addition to saying things about land, whatever, can also say things about the opposition. And I think you're right. Like, there's some crosstalk between the opposition as well as the people, because the moon represents the people as well. Like, I think, yeah, hidden enemies
Mhm.
galore.
Like
Mhm.
this may give ammunition,
Yeah.
to
Yes.
his enemies.
This could also be some of the family as the hidden enemies too, right?
Sure.
Because
Exactly.
the
Sure.
4th house is ruled by Mars, because we have Scorpio on this cusp.
Yep.
The Mars is in the 12th. So some of the family is not about this. They don't
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
They're not really thrilled. And they might be
Yeah.
colluding with some of those people.
Someone's
Okay.
colluding.
Someone's
I don't know.
colluding.
Somebody.
All right. So the moon is not in great state. She's void. If we go by modern standards, then the moon is making a final aspect to Neptune, and it is a trine, right? So remember harmony, it's water to water. They're working very easily together, but Neptune is in the 8th house, and the 8th house is not really a friendly house per se, right?
Nope.
It has more kind of hidden occultish vibes to it, endings, death, just some funky stuff can be happening. So this can be
8th house is also like debt, other people's money,
other people's
expenses.
money.
Like, who's paying for this?
And
Who's paying for this?
And with the eclipse, everyone's going to be asking that.
Exactly.
Everyone's going to be like checking the receipts, right? Like, who paid for this? Where did
Do
this
we
come
have coronation money?
Yeah.
We do not have coronation money, but here's something that just came to mind was like how much of this 8th house money is coming from abroad?
Yeah.
Who's funding this, right?
Yeah.
So if the UK is broke, where's the money for this carriage and brand new thrones? Who's funding this?
Yeah.
Is it only tax money, or is it money coming in from other parties who may or may not be in the interest of the UK? Which we already have issues with, right? We spoke about Charles's gambling and lobbying and getting money from foreign entities, right? So this could become an issue for him.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though it's a trine, it might be smooth in action in terms of people, really maybe finding out the receipts or finding where everything's hidden, or deep investigations, or the boundaries to keeping these things secret may be a lot looser.
I think as well the disillusionment, because I know everyone's like Neptune is dreamy, but Neptune can also be nightmarish, and it's like the disillusionment about like how much things cost just might not make people the most excited with that trine.
Yeah, and remember the moon is in Scorpio. It's a Martian sign. There's bound to be irritation and possibly anger, right?
Yeah.
That goes back a while because it is ruled by Mars and Cancer, and I feel like Cancerians are known for holding a grudge.
Holding a grudge for sure.
They don't forget much.
I don't know.
I'm teasing you guys. All right, so anything else about the moon?
No, she's in trouble.
She's also waning. Okay, so this is past the point of the full moon. A full moon would be when the moon and the sun are directly opposite to one another, right? That happens the day before, around the eclipse, around 14 degrees. This moon is now, since she's moved away from the full moon, now this moon is starting to lose light as she goes back into going into new moon phase, right? So now we're going around the chart. So this is energy that we're losing now. So he's walking in with a chart or a coronation or a reign that is now losing energy from the beginning.
It ain't got no juice.
It ain't got no juice.
It's
Right?
losing its juice. Yeah.
It's losing, the gas is running out quick,
Mhm.
right? So this is not ideal. So if we were picking a wedding and we saw, it was like, I don't know, this is not what we'd want to see for a long lasting marriage. We'd want to see a moon that's gaining light versus losing it.
No eclipse
Also,
and no eclipse.
The moon does not talk to either benefic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
So the
is
moon
bad.
she's not talking to Jupiter, so Jupiter can't help her, and she's not talking to Venus, so Venus
And you
can't
really
help
need
her.
it to. You really need the moon to do that
Yeah.
in an
So
election.
they're not helping her. She's
on her own.
She's on her own with the baddies.
Mhm.
So she has Mars, who is the lesser malefic, and she has Saturn, who is the greater
So
malefic. Right?
She's like sitting there getting these baleful rays from both these guys.
Baleful.
like help, and Venus and Jupiter are like, sorry lady, you're on your own.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can't help you. And even if they could help, these two are not in the strongest position.
I mean, yeah.
Neither Venus or Jupiter are souped up either. So even if they help, they wouldn't have a lot to give.
No.
Unfortunately.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So I think we covered the moon. So that alone, just that one thing would be enough. Like, you know what? No.
Well, wait, one more thing. If the moon's the people and the king is the sun, they're in opposition.
Yeah.
So
this is
like metaphorically, you don't even want that.
So what did we say about the opposition? Sometimes it's, lovers throwing themselves across the table. Sometimes it's being like, people. It could be a punch in the nose, right? Because we're not necessarily seeing things from the same vantage point. I'm across from you. I have a completely different perspective. While Charles is enjoying the luxury of Taurus, right? Peak Taurus gold.
The people are suffering.
The people are like, bro, we're hungry.
Help me.
You know what's funny though? Like, I think that the opposition that the moon makes to the sun is really special because it's also like the moon having the full brightness, like the most bright that she's gonna get. I mean, technically, like by eye, the moon will still look pretty full, even though she is losing light a little bit. And I do feel like this speaks to the people really being positioned to voice their discontent, right, with something. So
And
it might be
the sun's conjunct Uranus, and that's very like unstable for him. I wouldn't want to be there.
With the sun applying.
Yes, the sun's applying.
So applying towards, he's getting the relationship, the conjunction, the hijacking, the puppet hand is getting stronger.
Yes.
Right?
Very unstable.
Very unstable. And Uranus is not the kind of puppeteer you want to have for an easy reign.
That's like being on a shaky throne, on top of something that's moving, like a moving building. Don't slip.
This could also be talking about the responsibility Charles has in terms of ushering this new phase of change into the, the monarchy in the country, right? Yes. This is a value situation because Taurus is talking about our values. What do we want? And what Charles wants is a very different story from what the people want. Yeah. They're like, no gold thrones. He was like, no, extra ponies, please.
Wow.
Okay. Yikes. So the moon by herself, the eclipses, some of these planets are already telling us that this is not ideal, but there's still more. So, usually we try to avoid retrograde planets in a chart, especially the inner planets. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, especially, we want them to be forward facing. And in this chart, we do have Mercury retrograde, which is unfortunate because I think by dignity, Mercury is the strongest planet in this joint.
Oh yeah, Mercury does have some dignity in there.
Yeah. Okay, so meaning he has the most strength out of all the planets in the chart. He's the strongest one, and he's not even that strong, right? But he's also retrograde. So that strength, I guess, is a little bit diminished because of that retrograde status.
Man, it really makes me think, is this happening?
I don't know.
I gotta think about it.
Now, Mercury as a planet rules the 11th house, right? And Mercury also rules the second house. So I know the second house, right? Income, finances, things of that nature. But also the 11th house has some connotations with money made from the business, right? So this could be money made possibly from the monarchy or Charles's reign.
It's also government money.
Government money too.
Of the authority, right?
Right. So Mercury being involved with this super bright full moon, eclipse full moon, and retrograde. Do we think there's going to be some conversation about the money, where it's coming from?
And what you did with money you had in the past?
Yes, I love that, especially because Mercury is in its own decan in Taurus, where you're like scrutinizing every little penny that you're using and where it's going, and if you have enough to distribute effectively. Like there's a lot of maybe anxiety around the financial planning, which, you know, seems to be a common undertone or theme of the chart, where it's like, can we really afford all the stuff we're doing?
It's really interesting because, you know, back in the day when you used to coronate kings and stuff, they would give money and gifts away. Now it's gone the other way and we spend money on them. That's very weird. Might be people asking questions like, why are we giving you more money? Why aren't you giving us gifts? And why do you keep showing up to all these places without any gifts? You know, like what are you doing that for?
Let's see, I wanted to make a little circle here. This could also be, this Mercury North Node situation could be interesting, because you know how the North Node can amplify or intensify or add energy too. This could also be talking about excess, where you go way too far with the North Node. So there might be like, you know, aside from who's paying and how's paying, all that, I think once everything's paid for, if this goes off, I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about how excessive it was, especially because Jupiter
over budget.
Yeah, especially because Jupiter's not too far away. And Jupiter is probably going to cross these degrees by what, early May, June or so, roughly? Mid-May, May into June. I think Jupiter gets to these degrees, give or take. So I think they're going to be like, wow, you really spent a lot on this shit. And it was over the top.
Yeah, I wonder if eyes will turn to other countries too, because the UK is one of the few that still does a coronation. Most others don't bother.
So they're gonna be like, how come those other royals aren't spending all this fucking cash? Right. All right. So
it's just so much like intense scrutiny, right? You're just seeing the scrutiny multiply, because not only the eclipse, but also now the pocket watching with, you know, a retrograde Mercury in Taurus.
Yeah.
Another rule we try to avoid when we're looking at electional charts is that we want planets to be not too close to the anaretic degree. Anaretic talking about the last and first degree of a sign, right? Am I spelling that right? Anaretic, yes, degree. There we go. There we go. So we're talking about either 29 degrees to 0 degrees of a sign. Okay, so we have a couple of planets that are kind of close. Mainly Jupiter is close, but not too bad. He's getting there.
I mean, I'm more worried about that Venus.
That Venus though, girl. So I progressed this chart forward, meaning I pushed it forward a little bit to see when Venus gets to be 29 degrees of Gemini. And I believe that is going to be August 14th of 2023.
Did you say August 14th?
Yes.
There's an important transit that day.
Okay, well, girl, we're going to see it. So why don't we care for anaretic degrees? Basically, they're unstable, right? When you're thinking about degrees, you might want to think of it like from 0 to 29 of a sign, the energy of a sign is getting more intense as we go through the energy, right? So it's building in steam. once you get to that last degree, 29, things are like shaky. It's almost like when you're shooting a rocket into space and the stuff starts to fall off the ship as you cross through the layer of the atmosphere. That's where the 29 to 0 degree mark is for us. When the spaceship is like shedding stuff.
And you all felt it, because we all felt that last degree of Pluto. I'm sorry, in Capricorn, we all felt it. So you lived it. Now. You know it.
We're living it now.
Yeah.
We're gonna live it for another couple years.
Yeah. So Venus is about to start shaking, right? She's going to start becoming a little bit unstable and not able to do her duties, essentially. And she's going to be in that state.
I was going to say something about the anoretic degrees because, you know, in the Vedic system, they think of like different parts of degrees as like part of a life cycle. You know, when you get in those last few degrees of a sign, it's like an old person who's worn down and doesn't have energy. And, you know, when you're at the very beginning of a sign, it's like a baby. It can't do anything, right? And so you can think of like the transition from the very end of one sign to the beginning of another sign as a sort of death rebirth, right? And, you know, with Venus ruling the 10th whole sign house, right?
Yes, she is.
It's like, speaking to the condition of the ruler, it's like, I mean, Charles is quite literally old, right?
Yeah.
How much is he going to be able to do? Like, realistically,
is he the oldest king?
Yeah,
he might be.
Yeah, he is.
So Venus has dominion over the 10th house, right? Where the Sun, Uranus, Mercury, and the North Node are, right? And Venus also has dominion over the IC, which again can be representing the family, right? Or blood relatives. So what do you think is going to happen come August when Venus starts to shake? And will continue to shake from August all the way until June of 2025.
The siblings' knives come out.
Yeah, that's when she finally gets to 1 degree of Cancer and starts to ease out a little bit. So basically, pretty soon into this reign, I suspect that we're going to hear some issues pretty early on.
It's shaky.
It's shaky.
Very
this is a shaky chart. This is like, why would you choose this?
I have a question for you guys. I mean, I know Pluto's an outer planet, but how do you feel about Pluto at the very beginning?
Not great.
In Aquarius.
And retro.
He's retro. He's also square to the nodes, girl. Hello.
Yeah. Oh, that's Pluto coming for you.
That's we're gonna see this. Now remember, Pluto, when he was in Aquarius last, we did have the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is echoing a lot of those themes from hundreds of years ago. The same issues the French were having with their monarchy at the time of the revolution, the English are having with theirs now, which is resources being, ill-used, lack of money, lack of food, deprivation, poverty, while the wealthy and the aristocracy are living in luxury, right? So
Prime Minister's getting his heated pool.
And Pluto does not like that, especially not in the sign of Aquarius, when we should be interested in what happens to the collective, right? Now, Charles, so if we go back, was born, right, with Pluto in Leo, right? So there's a very opposite, right? This is a different kind of dance and party. People aren't into it.
Can he learn the new steps required and implement change?
Now, what do we know about Charles? He's a very fixed guy. Change does not happen easily for the fixed people in our lives.
What?
Nope.
What?
What?
Did I? I'm sorry. I'm just really mutable, so I'm just calling it like I call it. But
I'm just joking.
You're so right, though.
You're right.
There's going to be some breaking. There's going to be some shattering because fixed things tend to crash together and break before they are like, oh, we can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So
are we going to overlay Charles with the coronation next?
Yeah, that's next.
Because I think that's where the Pluto will make sense in context.
All right, so we're doing the coronation now. Where are we? Okay, so this is Charles on the middle wheel, and on the outside is the coronation chart. So right away we see that Pluto in Aquarius on his 7th house cusp.
Yep, squaring his moon.
Squaring the moon.
squaring his
Jesus.
dominant luminary.
Oof, oof, oof. Ouch, ouch, ouch. So there's Pluto and there's the moon.
And it's
That's
going
a
to be
pretty,
public,
pretty tight
Very
square.
public.
Yeah.
and everyone's going to see it.
So Pluto is what? The Lord of the underworld, the Lord of death, the Lord of transformation. He wants us to change for the better. It's a healing process, but healing is often ugly, right? When you get banged up, no one likes to look at that banged up leg, but it's healing.
You know what else? Pluto is also associated with massive wealth, because I know that was Hades
Hidden
got
wealth.
syncretized with Pluto, the agrarian Roman god,
Mhm.
because a lot of wealth at the time was being able to grow crops, and that's more of like a chthonic underground process. And so it's interesting that it's squaring the ruler of his 12th, which is in the 10th. And I feel like something that may be characteristic of his reign is this sort of undercover or uncovering of this sort of like the people that fund him, right, and support his reign. I don't know.
I think there's also, like you were saying, though, with the Agarian portion of Pluto, also Pluto being the underworld god where all the jewels and precious metals and oil hangs out under
Yes.
the ground, right?
Oil,
So-
you say?
Oil, you say?
Hmm.
Who has so much oil that Charles loves to talk to and chat with lately? Is it the Saudis?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that might become a thing, right?
Yeah.
And we're all going to see it. So Charles
Very
has to be
public.
very mindful, because the reaction is probably going to be a little bit ugly to the stuff that is coming out about him. And because Mo, like you said earlier, he may not have the sway of the press on his side anymore going forward, that may not go away easily.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
His nodal return.
Yeah, to the degree. That's pretty wild. So
degree.
To the
3 to
degree.
3, right?
Wow.
He's back
Impressive.
at home. So this is Charles's destiny, right?
Yes.
I mean, what are you gonna say? I think if Charles was a different person, had lived a different life, or had been a different prince, different husband, different father, this may not be as negative as it's appearing to be. But because he has all this historical baggage that he's created for himself, the reception feels especially funky,
Yeah.
because he's not coming in as a beloved king, because he wasn't a beloved prince.
No.
And everything surrounding this coronation is pointing out all the ways in which Charles is not beloved, which is very on par for a Scorpio sun. Poor boy. Like, I just, the rejection, even at the height of your life, the rejection is so deep, Charles.
You could put his face next to Scorpio sun in a book.
Rejection. Just never feeling like you are being accepted into the fold, right?
Oh my
Something
God,
about you is always off.
Why am I just now noticing he has a Sun Chiron conjunction? That explains so much.
So much.
Sad.
So much.
For those who are, we haven't really delved into Chiron much, but this is the wounded healer, right? Where we can typically feel perpetually wounded for whatever reason. And in Charles's case, he just feels perpetually wounded about who he is, right?
You know,
And
as a
that's
result of his birth and circumstances around his birth and where he's from, I guess. Like, yeah.
his family, you know, I guess his deepest wound in a way is his family, his upbringing.
Yeah.
Why didn't I notice till now that this was Saturn opposition, like partile, like to the degree?
Oh wow, that's a
Oh
good
gosh, I
point.
did not see that.
That is
So,
a good point. That is such wow.
Did not see
You
that.
brought up a very,
Bravo.
very good point.
Whoa.
So what do we know about Saturn cycles, guys?
As someone that just survived their Saturn opposition.
So everybody knows about the Saturn return, right? Saturn return talks about when Saturn is coming back home to the same sign and degree that he was at the time of your birth. But Saturn doesn't just forget you after that. He's continuing to helping you grow, right? So he continues around your zodiac. So he hits your opening
Keeps
square.
haunting you.
Yeah, right? So he goes from
Yes.
return, then he goes to the opening square, then he goes to the opening opposition, then he goes to the closing square. Oops, sorry.
And then
That's the not
returns.
the right
And then
one.
comes back.
And then he comes back. That should be Gemini, not Taurus. Actually, Gemini and then.
You're doing good. We love it. We
Anyway,
love it.
so you get the idea that this should be a square. But the
Yes.
opposition is a major deal because Saturn is kind of saying from across the table, so have you been doing your Saturn well?
Mhm,
I'm here to test you again.
mhm.
Right? Have you been
Yes.
managing your resources well, right? Because Charles has Saturn
is
in the
money.
second house. Money.
Money,
So have you
money,
been
money,
managing your money
money.
well? Or have you been
Wait a
using other
second.
people's money well?
Mhm.
No, you know what I just
Wow.
realized? Okay, so because Charles has Saturn ruling his seventh house, but also his sixth house, like I think of a
Mhm.
couple of things that come to mind.
Okay.
Like I think about all of the stuff that's come out about like the things that he's doing for his partners, like family and stuff. So like Camilla or children, things like that. But like see how he's treating his own in comparison. That's just like a weird thing to think about. You know?
But
Mhm.
that's another thing of like, how are you spending your resources, right? Who are you
Yeah.
spending it on? Who are you choosing to spend it on? Who are you leaving out?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Which house holds the grandchildren?
Grandchildren, I
Boy.
mean, you can, I would say it's ninth because it's fifth from the fifth.
Okay.
Mm,
So be ruled by that Mars
mm,
in
mm,
the fifth,
mm.
which Saturn will be squaring.
Never mind.
Never mind. Not looking too hot for Archie and Lily.
None for
Hope you
Archie
didn't need
Lily.
anything from your grandpa.
And that's not,
Right.
but that's not on you, babies. That's totally on him, right?
Yeah.
So Saturn's going to have a lot to say with how Charles manages the resources going forward.
Yes.
And that will be another big conversation because Saturn's going to come back to that degree 2 more times, right?
Yes, it is.
Because this year Saturn's going back between 0 and 7
7.
degrees of Pisces 3 times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're going to have 3 opportunities to have this conversation with Charles about this issue. Tres.
I love it.
No avoiding.
I love it.
Saturn doesn't let you off the hook. So
I mean, it's
Not at
interesting
all.
that he has a very easy aspect with the nodes too. So remember what we said about that sextile, where it's just with a little bit of effort, things
It's a
start
little bit of
moving.
effort. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they say we want to check the receipts, they might get the ball
Better hand
rolling
them
on that.
over.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Anything else?
uh,
The Venus again, like we said,
on the Uranus.
on the Uranus of Charles. So that Venus is already unstable and will continue to be unstable.
Oh my God, it's opposite his Jupiter too. I forgot about that.
Right?
I think there's going to be more issues about like what he passes down to his children and their children, and that being like a thing that characterizes how people perceive his reign. So, yeah,
Mm.
the titles too, maybe.
the title issue.
What about, oh yeah, the titles, because it's not really factoring land and property, right?
No.
Or
No.
would we, so what would be
They
the
don't get
situation?
anything.
Yeah, because I'm just
Kind
thinking
of
about
sad.
Frogmore, the whole situation with the housing and things like that. How much that would factor in to that Venus, Jupiter, Uranus situation. But just a thought.
I'm feeling more of like, I feel like it's like simultaneously the Frogmore issue and then where he's putting Andrew up because he's also evicting Andrew from, what was it, Royal Lodge?
Royal Lodge, yeah, in Windsor.
To put him in Frogmore.
In the basement
But
apartment of Frogmore.
And possibly William and Kate, or maybe just William, who knows at this point, would be moving into the Royal Lodge, which I think would make it their 5th property from what they have already. So again, you get this theme of, so you guys have so much and yet everyone else around you has nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Wow.
Anything else? Nope.
I think one more comment I did want to make is I feel like the Jupiter being in his natal ninth, and then
Mhm.
like trining his Jupiter as well.
Mhm.
I don't know why. I'm just feeling like something with grandchildren. I don't know if there's just more grandchildren or just them being more prominent in some way.
Mhm.
Feels
Oh
relevant.
wait, isn't this when you were talking too about um, emissaries and gifts from overseas?
Yes.
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 Do that
Mm.
point again. Do it again. Do it again.
Oh yeah, because another signification of the fifth house that people overlook are emissaries, so people who act on your behalf, whether that's like a diplomat or an agent.
Mhm.
And then also speculation,
Mm. Mhm.
which is like, playing with the stock market or gambling. And you
Mm.
see that Jupiter is in the ninth of foreign places.
Mhm. Mm.
See where I'm going with this? Like, I
Mhm.
think also that featuring very prominently in this particular
Yeah.
chart. So
Foreign speculation,
Yeah.
foreign bribes.
Well, just could we talk
sure.
about the cash for honors, right?
Yes.
Maybe even money laundering to an extent. I know there's a big oligarchy class in the UK where people, a lot of
Yes.
Russian influence as well. I know that's been a conversation piece, especially with Brexit, especially with the current war. There's been a lot of conversation about the UK-Russian connection and how many Russians in the UK own football teams, own yachts, have,
I mean, not just them, the Saudis as well.
salaries as well. So there's a lot of foreign interest. But it's interesting that it's Mars, it's Aries, right? So these are people that I think traditionally societies or Western cultures have been told that these are our enemies, but yet they're living lavish here, right? Um, Also know what you were saying about the grandchildren being the ninth house, possibly. Just thinking about again, possibly Archie and Lily coming up because they would be the foreign grandchildren at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys already know how I feel. I just have a gut feeling we're gonna have a third baby Sussex. So I
Maybe.
One
just
more.
feel it. I feel it in my gut, and I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, let's do it.
I wish
I
they
don't
never said
know.
they wanted to. It was like this. That should have been. I don't know. Whatever. So now I feel like
I
if
don't
they
know.
do have a third, they'll be like, "Where's when you wanted to?"
I don't know. Something about that Uranus getting close to Harry's moon. I wouldn't rule it out. And
Surprise.
Jupiter going into Taurus, like
Surprise, shorty.
surprise.
I mean, I will say I love a pregnant Megan. I think she's so cute when she's pregnant. I think her fashion's really
Yeah.
cute. She looks, oh my god, you're so cute when you're pregnant, girl. I
Mhm.
love it.
Amen.
All right. Anything
Yeah.
else before we switch?
No.
No. Okay. Let's switch.
Talk to us about Aries ingress charts. Tell us, tell
All
us.
right.
Okay, so I think it's helpful to put all of this in the context of the Aries ingress chart. So basically, this derives from the sort of astrologers of the medieval Islamic era because certain cultures in that part of the world celebrated their new year at the beginning of that spring equinox. And so that
Mhm.
became the basis of us using the Aries ingress chart as the sort of astrological new year. And what you would do is you would cast the chart for a particular capital or government because that's the seat of where all the affairs for a particular country takes place, right? And you can use that chart to say things about the fate of a particular nation, right? Or a particular government. And this is a big deal because there's this, I can't remember the exact term, but there's this idea that there are root charts that affect everything. So a lot of us living within particular countries are affected by the chart of the country we're living in. And so I think it's helpful to like kind of look at what's happening for the UK itself for 2023 and seeing where Charles's transits as well as this coronation fits into that context.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean,
Mhm.
we see that in this chart, like I think it's funny because obviously the sun is always going to be exalted because it's in Aries, but it's interesting to see what house it rules. So, the sun rules the 10th. I mean, feels like a good year to crown a new leader, right? The sun is always going to be in the first decan of Aries, so it's initiating, right? It's literally like a new birth.
Mhm.
So, we're going to this year crowning a new leader. Cool. Uh But look at that south node right on the ascendant. Look at that. You know, the south node
doesn't feel
again,
good.
it doesn't feel good. And, you know, the ascendant of a particular Aries ingress describes the country, its state, how the people are doing, aside from also looking at the moon as well. And, you know, this is, first of all, the first part of Scorpio is very, very hungry, right? And it doesn't help that you have the south node there because there's connotations of deprivation.
Mhm.
So yeah, people going hungry.
Mhm.
Literally.
Also,
Literally.
the ruler of the chart, because Scorpio rising is ruled by Mars and Gemini, again in the 8th house.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
being strapped for cash, you know.
But also
So-
death or, you know, sudden,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff.
I
People
think there's
going into debt.
I
Yeah.
know they were talking about this is random, but I know that I was seeing some conversation about they were trying to monitor knives in the UK for like stabbing incidences. They were like, maybe we should put
Oh.
like tracking devices in all the knives, and it's just like, what? But I'm
Wait,
assuming-
they try to stop violence from happening? Wow.
Girl.
Okay. Interesting.
But Mars having connotations with being sharp objects and things like that. But also like thinking about Mars like a tool to dig. It's like you know, again, digging for resources, looking to find stuff and not being able to find anything.
You know what else? So Mars in a Scorpio rising chart by whole sign will always rule the 6th house as well. 6th house can have to do with labor and health. I know there's been a lot of stuff with the funding of the NHS and issues with that. So,
and I think there's also been some scandal lately going back to 2020 about how the Tory government handled
yes,
COVID, the NHS, and all this
Yup.
and scandal around that.
More
Aren't they also
investigation.
having strikes too? Like
Yes.
rail strikes and
Yes.
stuff?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is an uncomfortable, it's not going great chart.
It's not a nice spring chart, especially with the little Aries stellium in the 6th. So the 6th house having
No.
connotations with like illness, injuries, slavery, even, you know, just feeling very much cast out into the cold in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's interesting? Like, so something that I noted about the Aries ingress, which I do plan on writing about before, you know, the sun moves into Aries tomorrow. I feel like, you know, there's some connotations there around, you know, when I see planets that are combust, sometimes in some systems of astrology, that's a planet that's very angry, right? And Mercury rules sort of like the 11th house, which does have to do with, I would say certain elements of like parliament or like these legislative bodies, if you will. And then, 8th house also has to do with, like we said, death resources. I think also, especially with Mercury, like, and having such a mercurial 8th house, we're going to be doing a lot of digging in terms of like how the previous Tory government handled COVID and everything. Yeah, combustion is when a planet is too close to the sun.
By how many
Yeah.
degrees?
Ouchie.
So proper combustion is 7 degrees on either side of the sun. Under the beams is, I think, 12 degrees
12, yeah.
from the sun. Under the
And then
beams.
Kazemi would be, yeah, like
Kazemi is that purification by burning and fire. So depending on system, you can use 17 arc minutes or 1 degree. I just say same degree. So like
Yeah,
within
same
the same
degree,
degree
yeah.
or partile counts for me. But that is a very combust Mercury.
yeah.
So what Mo
It's
was just
burning.
talking about, hold on, so you guys don't get lost, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Mercury is too close to the sun, getting roasted, girl.
Yep.
Too hot.
Frying.
Can't see it,
Frying.
angry, right? That Mercury is in control of the 11th house via the sign of Virgo, and Mercury is also in control of the 8th house through the sign
Yeah,
of Gemini. So
yeah.
this burnt, angry, crispy Mercury is the one who's in control with these two houses and just not about it, not thrilled. He's also in the house that's not too pleasant, which is the 6th house.
Ooh.
And next to
I just thought
Chiron.
of something. I thought of two things. One, it looks like the monarch who's quite literally the sun, or like, you know, Charles. I mean, I could also see the 10th house speaking to the prime minister as well, like
Mhm.
throwing other people under the bus, like other
Mhm.
legislators under the bus to,
Mhm.
throw them to the
Yeah.
wolves because the people are angry, right?
Yeah.
Another thing I could also see is like Mercury, like making it difficult for putting more scrutiny on the monarch or the prime minister based on, those handlings, those backdoor deals that get made, right?
Mhm.
But then, like, because it's too close to the sun, like when things are too close to the sun, they're not seen,
Mm,
they're overlooked.
got it. So
So,
are you
yeah.
saying that there could be, like you said, the receipt pulling and all this kind of stuff, but because the sun has the strength that it does,
Yep.
that stuff will be obliterated essentially?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it
Okay.
like burning all the spy stuff when the spies are knocking, the Americans are knocking at your door? Like
Yep.
shovel all of your embassy notes into the fire before you
Yeah.
leave.
100%.
Question though,
Yeah.
what do you think about the moon eventually getting to these two planets? So like the people, right? So, okay, the people are next to Neptune. There could be some deception, some
Oh my God,
delusions,
they're
some
self-medicating right now. Are you kidding me?
They're getting drunk.
they're getting drunk
They're getting drunk.
in the fifth house. Let's party. All right, but
Mhm.
eventually they're going to get to the sun and Mercury. So I
Yes.
don't know. Maybe at first they can get away with it, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering if we progress this chart, how long it would take for the moon to be like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So we might
Yeah.
have to come back to that later, but I think they might get a little bit of reprieve, but eventually it's going to catch up with them, I think.
I mean, the moon, like, if we ignore Neptune, its next aspect is to Mars.
Oh,
That
yes.
doesn't look like a very
No.
happy
No.
aspect. So while the people are a little maybe distracted, maybe self-medicating, maybe also because the fifth house also has to do with like children as well. I think there's going to be more concern about, what's going on with children.
Yeah. Especially when
Uh,
the ruler of the house of children is in the sixth, right? And next to
yeah.
Chiron. So there's been a lot of issues around feeding children at school and keeping them safe, and just a lot of
Yes.
issues with them lately.
Yes, the sustenance of children. I do think that people may be applying pressure on the government to do more to address, shortages in labor and issues with compensating people effectively. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. So the strikes are likely to continue because the
Oh, yeah.
sixth house also has a lot to do with, the workers, people
Mhm.
who show up every single day to make the routine things in our society run, right? Our essential workers who are now what did our mayor in New York call them?
Yeah.
Hamburger
Call them
flippers.
ham flippers and shoe polishers and get back to work, you peasants.
Oh my God.
God.
You know what else I'm seeing? So you see that Venus on the North Node. So the
Mhm.
seventh house does represent just other nations in general, but also open enemies. And then 12th house is hidden enemies.
Mhm.
But what's funny is that like literally all of Europe has this chart. So it's just like there may be,
Mm.
and Venus is on the North Node. So it's like there may be this perception that your enemies and their allies are doing better than you, but in
Interesting.
reality,
Everyone's in
no.
the same boat.
We're all like on the
We're all
same
struggling. We're all on the
garbage
struggle bus.
All struggle bus together, girl.
But one thing I could see is just difficulty with other nations, especially if there's secret deals or alliances being made that, they're not a part of. And I think that's going to be a problem for most of Europe because there's a lot of fixed stuff, especially in Scorpio Taurus in that chart.
Mhm.
So I think that's probably what that's speaking to. So yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, and this could also be having to lean a little bit more heavily on allies or relationships, just
Yes.
because the North Node is draining out the first and energizing this
Exactly.
seventh house. So as a nation
Yes.
right now, they might be a little bit tired. They just don't got it. So
They don't.
the partner, the people who are making business contracts are the ones who have the upper hand, I think, with the
Yep.
UK going forward. Right?
Mhm.
They don't have negotiating power.
Precisely.
So everyone's like, why did you sign that stupid deal? Like people can take advantage in a way, right?
Yeah.
And who's gonna check Venus and Taurus? Who?
Nobody.
Who gonna check
Nobody.
me, boo?
No one's
Venus
checking
and
her.
Taurus. I run this joint.
Right.
All right. Anything else about the chart?
No, I think we
Let's-
can
Let's look at it.
overlay
Yeah.
All right.
Charles, the UK, and this chart, because I think it'll
Okay.
speak a lot of volumes.
Alrighty.
A tri-wheel.
Oh my
Tri-wheel. So Charles is the center wheel. The middle
Uh-huh.
wheel is the UK that we were just looking at, or before, and this is the ingress chart on the outside wheel. Right? I did that right. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I just love how the midheaven of the not the UK chart but the ingress chart
Mhm.
is like on Charles's Pluto.
To degree. So loud.
It's like
So
quite
loud.
literally the transformation into the like proper monarch after he's made the covenant, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So a lot of connections between Charles's power and the role that he's going to be playing in the UK, right? To an extent.
Yeah.
But when you make that covenant, you have to keep it, or else Pluto comes for you.
Will come for you.
If you don't fulfill your obligations to the people and to the country and the land, Pluto comes and takes it back.
Definitely with a vengeance.
Come for blood. What else we got going on? Are we saying the UK chart, the UK's Venus is so tight to the IC of the ingress chart?
Yeah. Which is interesting because that Venus rules the UK chart.
Yeah.
And I know that there's just been this I feel like there's this like trying to reposition what Britain's role is now that Brexit is in full swing. I think that's going to be very much a huge, challenger issue going forward. And I think that whether Charles likes it or not, that's going to really affect the perception of his reign.
Just because, like we were saying, like the UK just doesn't have maybe the juice or the energy to do a lot of the stuff they did before. So
Yeah.
he's like pressing, the gas pedal down, like let's like get it going.
But
And
where's it going?
There's nothing. There's no gas in the tank to go anywhere.
It also makes me think that Charles might have difficulty. I don't know if the right word is it representing or like shopping around or like as the royals that they're kind of like the representatives for the country in a way. You know what I mean? The fact that it's in his seventh house and it's Venus and it's the ruler of the UK chart, it makes me feel like I don't know, like will he be able to pull it off? Like especially with his royal tours, like him being the what is it? The salesman essentially.
Yes.
For the UK may not be as easy, especially in the aftermath of Saturn just getting done with Venus recently. And then Pluto's going to be coming into the picture soon. So they might have to revamp the entire way that they market themselves going forward.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, is that so one thing you can do is look at where the angles of the ingress fall in like the country's chart, whichever chart you choose to use. I think it's interesting that, natally Britain has or this iteration of the UK that we're experiencing has a south node on the ascendant in Libra. This time it's a south node on the ascendant in
Scorpio
in the second house. And that corresponds to Charles's family, right? And I think that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny about whether, Charles and his family are still bringing value to the UK, especially when people are dealing with austerity. Yeah. Because even to market this stuff to the UK itself. Yeah.
They have to market to their own people first.
Forget marketing it to us because we already know this is not good marketing, but to actually convince the people to go along with this too is not going to be easy. I don't think, especially like I said earlier, with Pluto coming into the picture with Venus in the same house at least. I would say probably looking at it starting next week, March 23rd, is it? When Pluto moves into Aquarius?
The 23rd.
Until June 11th. Yeah.
something
So
like that.
so we're going to see how Pluto shakes this dynamic up pretty soon, where they might not be able to sell like, oh, we're so sophisticated in English, and people are like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Only in books, girl. Because people are now seeing how much stuff is, coming out about the English, the history of the UK, the British royal family. All this stuff is just very eye-opening.
Yes.
The veneer is coming off. And Lizzie's not around. Lizzie's
No.
reputation was a really big shield.
They didn't milk that exalted Venus ruling the 10th enough.
No.
Yeah. I like the Jupiter of the ingress on top of that North Node in the UK chart, but then also Charles's midheaven. Definitely speaks to his expanding role for sure. As monarch. So yeah.
But Chiron is still very much featured in this, isn't he?
Yeah.
There is some pain involved here.
Jupiter's a planet of faith and morality, and I do feel like with Chiron Jupiter stuff, there is some loss of faith. A little bit.
Disillusionment of what you thought,
Yeah.
like loss of faith in institutions too.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that Jupiter is ruled again by that Mars in Gemini, who is
Why is Mars all up in everything?
Mars has been a lot since August of last year, and I am fatigued.
I'm ready for Mars. Like, I know Mars is not the happiest in Cancer, but I am sick of Mars and Gemini. I'm sick of it.
We're so ready for it to be over.
Over it.
Over it, girl. But yeah, and we know that this Mars, what did we say earlier about this 11th house? Venus is here too.
And the coronation chart.
The coronation chart, and Mars a little bit unstable, right? So
do you want to actually switch to the coronation chart? Because I think that could be interesting to look at. Yeah.
Charles, coronation, and ingress.
Yes. The triwheel? Hold on. There we go.
There we go. Look at that.
Oh my God, look at that Mars on top of the Venus.
Woo, ouchie.
So this is a big pile up of energy.
You know what you said about, I really love that you said when you progressed the his coronation, and how that coincided with about what? Did you say the
August
13th?
14th? August 14th.
It's interesting because we'll just be coming off of the Venus retrograde Cazimi, which is on the 13th, I believe. And that's actually squaring Charles's sun, and it's in his first house. So I'm just like, that's like a purification of, Charles's intent around his like profession, but also because the sun is his ruler, it's him, right? So I think that, and it's happening in his first house, so like that's going to be an interesting period to watch. And I think that you're right for highlighting that date. Like there's just a lot going on. So
I wonder if I can very briefly hold on, guys, animate this. So oops, probably not. It's probably gonna be too complicated. Never mind. Every time I try, it never goes right. But what I wanted to do was show you what Mo was talking about. Was like this summer we're gonna have that long Venus retrograde period in Leo. So in Charles's first house, Venus is gonna be going back and forth, right? And remember what we said about Venus being in control of this 10th house, right? And that third house of title. So there might be some walking back of original decisions too. Because maybe of negative press or it not being received well, that you might have to say, you know what, on second thought, I changed my mind. Maybe I will get this title.
You know what else you said? Because Jupiter as well will be in the 10th, and Jupiter rules both his 5th house of children, 8th house of legacies. I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So so I hope we've been able to illustrate just how many things are not so great about this coronation chart in relation to Charles, in relation to the UK.
Do you think that he might take away someone else's titles? I was thinking about Beatrice and Janie.
Okay, like this is okay. I know this is not about like because I'm thinking of that eclipse that happens the day before.
Mhm.
And that eclipse happens right on Harry's chart ruler. On top of that, I know that the nodes are going to shift into Harry's 10th, such that,
Mm.
the South Node is going through his 10th. And, eventually that South Node will cross his Venus. So Harry and Charles have their Mars and Venus roughly in the same place, actually, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So this may sound really out there. My gut says that either Harry is just not going to go to the coronation, and that sparks the taking away of titles, or Harry just gets fed up and like doesn't do the titles, because another reason I say this is there's other activations in Meghan's chart this year as well that just makes me think they're like done with the whole thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking like that could be like a major shakeup, not only of Harry and Meghan, but other reshuffling, with the rest of the family.
Because it's like, okay, if Harry's gonna say, that, like, I know while he's not second in line to the throne, it's like until the kids are of age, technically Harry would be next,
Regent.
right? So,
well, they'd be next, but yeah, there'd be a regency or whatever.
Yeah, and I feel like he would naturally be like the regent, like like, because he's the oldest, and after all of them, he would be next. So it's like, I'm like, guys, I don't see him like deciding he's gonna want to come back anytime soon. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like that was just, But also, like, one thing that people brought up is that, if Harry's willing to just kind of, what Harry's done is kind of made a mockery of the monarchy as a concept. And I think him deciding to walk away from the whole thing would just really like make the whole thing really questionable, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, because it's not even like Harry is like some unknown, nobody cares about royal. He's one of the most popular, or was the most popular right after the Queen, right? So, and it wasn't like it was a big gap between them either, maybe just a couple of points. So if you're saying like the second most popular royal after the late Queen is willing to leave this whole thing behind, what's going on?
The point, like, why? And it's like, if he's, choosing to do that, like, obviously heads will roll, but I think like it's going to overshadow anything that Charles hopes to do with the monarchy, to be honest. Like, and I do see that being a real possibility for sure.
Remember, I think we've discussed this before, but this whole idea that Harry being crowned in the court of public opinion, where it really counts, right?
Yeah.
Every so often I see good King Harry, trending on Twitter at random, just randomly. So really and truly across, a good amount of the world to an extent really do like him a lot more than his father and his brother. Just outright.
Yeah, everywhere outside of the UK, it seems like that's
well, even within the UK, because then we have to remember that we're dealing with a corrupt press system, right? That's owned by certain people who are trying to convince everybody else that this is the truth. So it's a really weird place. And then also recently we learned that I think Harry's going to be going to court and testifying in court over phone hacking that happened 10 or 15 years ago. So, all of this is swirling around Charles, who also has that really weird relationship with the press. And he can't control Harry anymore. He can't shut him up.
Listen, theoretically, I just have a feeling that they're gonna say fuck these titles and eventually become like a part of the billionaire class. That seems to be the trajectory they're on, right? So whatever, I don't know.
Well,
just a thought.
We shall see. Anything else about this chart? I think we have given how many different examples?
I was just looking at
That's the chart.
look at that fourth house with all those
Yeah, that's a lot.
south node draining energy. I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that everything that's happening with the UK is really going to be a huge part of his nodal return story for sure.
Mhm,
Mhm.
Like it's huge.
mhm. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this Sun Uranus is really, this is talking about him. This is kind of giving like the last in a way.
Isn't
Your
that
the last of what it was.
is that
Yeah.
similar to Tsar Nicholas's coronation?
Probably. We should totally bring those up again.
Didn't that? Yeah, I mean, we could do another episode on that, but I'm pretty sure there was a Sun Uranus
Probably.
something configuration in Tsar Nicholas's chart
And
about
that would
the end
make
of
a
the monarchy.
lot of sense.
I know there was a lot of fixed stuff in here. This is actually how me and Kelly met on Twitter, I think, was talking about the astrology of the Roman,
The Romanovs?
the Romanovs and their fall,
Mm.
and just the astrology of that. And I
Mm.
think it would be a great chat to talk about former monarchies that have fallen and looking at those charts and
Yeah.
seeing if
Hey.
there are any similarities that we might be looking at right
Listen,
now.
it's the Pluto return of the French Revolution. What better way to start than with that?
Mhm.
I'm just
I
saying.
will say, I think what I remember about the Romanov coronation chart, I believe there was a Sun Uranus. I remember that.
There was
Like he
something
was,
Sun Uranus something.
and then there was also the nodes, I think, were in Leo and Aquarius. I think it was
Okay.
an Aquarius North node to a Leo South node. I remember
It's
saying like,
those fixed nodes, honey.
it's gonna break. It's gonna break. And I remember saying when I was delineating online, I was like, yo, he was supposed to make it more equitable, right?
Yeah.
That's
And
what he
the
was being
issue,
called to, right?
that's what he was being called to do, and he did not do it. He did
And
the
he did none
reverse,
of
where
those
he
things.
put all the gold with the rich, and it fell to shit, girl. He was supposed to distribute it, and he did not, and it went terribly wrong.
Right.
So, Charles, sir, do not mess with these fixed nodes and planets because they do not bend, they will break, and you
They
will
will.
be covered in glass, girl. And you will not like it.
Yeah. I love it.
So, yeah. Anything else, ladies? I think we've kind of proven our point about this chart not being ideal. The timing is not ideal, but it seems to be fated. And Charles has.
Listen, one way or another, I think that Charles is going to be tasked with needing to reform the monarchy, whether it will go in the way that he wants it to, or whether it goes into whatever it needs to be. I think that will be that will remain to be seen, but I do think that something about his shift into power after losing his mother, who was literally queen forever,
Mhm.
is just also a sign of the times. Like I also think about the fact that Queen Elizabeth is one of the last like leading or authority figures who was alive during World War II,
Mhm.
which we're having a lot of transits that do echo that time. So
Mhm.
Charles was born, after all of that, right? And so I think of Joe Biden as well, like also being a figure who's like born at the end of that period or during that period, right? And so these people taking the helm when a lot of that astrology is repeating is just very interesting and weird.
It's also very telling too, right? Like these are the children that were born after such a major conflict. Did they catch the
Yup.
lessons, or are they going to let this shit happen again? And this is probably another conversation, but as Pluto enters into Aquarius, it's going to start opposing the Pluto of all these boomers, right? And also squaring the Pluto for most millennials, elder
Yeah.
millennials.
So the thing is with the millennials, what's interesting is that right now we're getting to that point of Pluto's orbit where it spends more and more time in the signs, and we're having our Pluto squares a lot earlier than people who were boomers did, and even people before that. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, but also think about the power dynamics and the handing off of power too. Because I'm thinking about this, my own parents, they're boomers. They're going to start transitioning out. after a
Yeah.
while, right? And the baton of power and influence is going to be start passing down the generations pretty soon. So this
Yeah.
is a big change because remember, the boomers love power. That
They
Pluto and
sure
Leo is like,
do.
I am king forever. And we're like, die, not in a bad way, but die so that we can step up and start fixing shit.
Listen,
We
Pluto in
love the
Aquarius
boomers.
is like, you thought.
Right? So we're going to see some really intense stuff happening with the current power structure, the coming Pluto influence, and the younger generations being like, fuck this noise, we can't do this no more.
Yeah.
So, and interestingly enough, the sun that has that Pluto is Harry, right? Because I believe
Yeah.
William has Pluto in Libra. I
He
think.
does have Pluto and Libra. Yeah.
So Harry is the clarion call for this shit don't work no more. Fix it.
It's broken.
It's broken. It don't
Really
work.
broken.
Fix it, Mr. Virgo. We'll fix it. We'll heal it. All right. That's all I got. Do you guys have anything else you want to say?
No.
No? Well, this has been fun. I hope you guys who are watching at home have enjoyed this. We did our best to explain a little more, but please let us know in the comments what you thought, what you think might happen with all of these aspects and eclipses and all sorts of fun things that are happening in this chart. And yeah, thank you so much for watching us and being patient with us as we got back to you, but we're going to see what happens next. And it's going to be exciting, I think. This is for the history books, guys. We're writing history right now.
Can we stop living through historical moments?
I know, 50 years from now, they'll be like, this is what happened at the turn of the reign of King Charles III. Yeah, 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 right? So this is the stuff that we are living through right now. It's intense, but here we are, right? So happy spring to everybody.
Happy
Whee!
spring.
We made it through the winter and spring is springing, and it's off to the races again. So we will be back soon. We're going to wrap around and do the charts for everybody else that we promised to do at the beginning of the year, and then we'll do some other stuff. So let us know what you're interested in talking about. Maybe we'll come back with the Romanov charts or other fallen empire charts if we can dig them up and look at some clues, and we'll see if we have any similarities. But if you have other topics or conversations that you want us to cover, let us know and we'll try our best to do it. All right, so thank you again. We love you so much, and next time.
Bye.